is my Sunday school class. We've been going through the Bible, starting in Genesis, starting at the first day of the pandemic since 2020. Went through Genesis, Exodus, we're now going through Leviticus. I've discovered that I learn more when we go verse by verse. It's easier to keep things in context and understand what's being said. We're now in Leviticus chapter 9. In the previous chapter, okay, God, and for those who have not been through it again, um, God is trying to teach Israel how to have a relationship with Him. They've been in Egypt for a couple hundred years, and they've witnessed Egyptian religion and all the different gods that they worship. And He's saying, nope, there's really only one God. Those others are fake gods. I'm the real God. Let me teach you how to have a relationship with me, which they did not know. Abraham had a relationship with Him. Isaac, Jacob had a relationship with God. And then his sons were in Egypt and never got the chance to have their own relationship with God. And they weren't able to teach that to their children, who weren't able to teach that to. They were to tell them stories of what the patriarchs had gone through. But as far as them understanding how to have a personal relationship with God, they had no idea. So God is teaching them. He's explaining there's a thing called sin, which is not my opinion, God is saying. He's saying, I actually created the heavens and the earth. And these things that you're doing will cause you to destroy my creation or destroy yourselves. You are my creation, or destroy your relationship with me. When you do those things, I have a way out. Blood must be shed, because you have to understand how deep a penalty it is, like how bad a thing it is. So every time you sin, blood has to be shed. Here's the uh, and so here's a system for doing that. So he explains that you're going to have a tabernacle, you're going to come in, blood sacrifices, etc. And then he chooses Moses' brother, Aaron, and his sons. Not Moses' son, because that's a whole other story we're going to get into with Moses and his sons. He chooses Aaron and his sons to be priests, and therefore their grandchildren and great grandchildren, everything, this family is called. Um, so he says you have to consecrate the priests. They themselves are sinners, so they must be consecrated. And he's explaining how to do that. In chapter 8, he gives this whole ritual that they have to go through involving 5 different sacrifices. And they have to do it every day for 7 days. You can't leave the tabernacle. Can't leave it to do normal secular things. You are setting yourselves apart. You can use it to go use the bathroom, but then you're setting yourselves apart for my service. In Leviticus chapter 9, he says, so here's what's going to happen on the 8th day. So 7 days in a row, you did the same ritual. You stayed in the temple, because we're consecrating and setting apart the priest who are going to minister to the rest of everybody else. On the 8th day, so Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1, it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. So Aaron and his sons and the elders. So they're all getting this instruction. The word elders literally means the bearded ones. Now, some of you may know women that start to grow little beards. So maybe God did that on purpose to say, these men are bearded ones, these women are bearded ones. But as long as you're elder, you are wise, right? So this was their distinction. This is the term that they chose. They said, these men are the elders. God never said, only choose men. That's just how they looked at it. And he said to Aaron, verse 2, take for yourself a young bull as a sin offering and a ram as a burnt offering. 5 offerings: sin offering, burnt offering. Then there are 3 other types of offerings. God taught it to them in the reverse order. kind of order of importance. Number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1, right? So now he's saying, here's how I want you to do it. Um, a young bull is a sin offering, a ram is a burnt offering, without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. Now, they've just been doing that for 7 days. Why do we have to do it again on the 8th day? Because he does want to establish that under the law, sin is never finished. Sin is never taken care of. You got to worry about it every day. You got to worry about it every day. Blood must be shed every day. So that when the Messiah comes and does it once for all time, then we prefer that. We think, oh, that's a much better system. I just have to believe in what he did, and that it covered my sin. So the choice is, let's be under the law, and every day we have to go out and find the lamb, and stuff, or we can look to the lamb, right? But he still wants to drill in them. This is the law, and under the law, you got to do it every day, every day, every day. It's just never satisfied. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 3 says, and to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, so here's what you got to do as the priest. You're going to do a sin offering and a burnt offering. Then to the children of Israel you're going to speak, saying, take a kid of the goats as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both of the first year, without blemish, as a burnt offering. So you got to do a sin offering and a burnt offering. Then they got to do a sin offering and a burnt offering. Why do they have to be without blemish? Well, because, again, that's a type of Christ, sinless, right? Make sure it's the first year, because just on a day-to-day basis, you just bring anything in, it's the act of sacrificing. But for this specific occasion, I want you to think of the priest and this whole consecration as someone without blemish, so that you're anticipating someone eventually coming without blemish, right? Without sin. So, sin offering, a burnt offering, verse 4, and then a bull and a ram as peace offerings to sacrifice before the Lord, and a grain offering mixed with oil, for today the Lord will appear to you. So a bull and a ram, there's 2 types of peace offerings, and then a grain offering. For today the Lord will appear to you. So all these other things they were doing, they build the temple, God not manifesting his presence. But he says, because we've reached now the end of this particular ritual, I'm actually going to appear to you. Verse 5, so they brought what Moses had commanded before the tabernacle of meeting, and all the congregation drew near. So he told the elders and the priest what to do, and now the whole congregation is drawing near, and they stood before the Lord. Now, he's not literally there, but there were anticipation at the temple. I mean, he hasn't manifested himself. God is everywhere, whether we feel it or he's manifested or we see a cloud. He says, but now I'm going to reveal myself. So they're waiting before the Lord. They're waiting at the tabernacle. They know that's where he generally hangs out. And then Moses, verse 6 says, this is the thing which the Lord commanded you to do, and then the glory of the Lord will appear to you. This word glory is kabod. Kabod. K-A-B-O-D. Kabod. And I'm bringing that up because of Ichabod. That's where we all, well, I guess if you're our age, you know Ichabod. Ichabod Crane. So here's what that means. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, after Israel had gone into the promised land, and they're carrying around the Ark of the Covenant, they don't have a permanent home yet. A temple hasn't been built. They're just carrying the tabernacle around in tents. They go to battle and they lose badly. Verse 3 of 1 Samuel says, 4, when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? The Philistines beat them. Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh so that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. So they never stopped to get the answer to the question, why did the Lord defeat us? And they were clear, why did the Lord bring defeat on us? They're clear, if they win, it's God. If they lose, it's God. Today we teach, if we win, it's God. If we lose, it's the devil. So we never examine our losses. We never go, now why did that happen? We know the answer. It was the devil. But we're wrong because the devil can't do anything God does not allow. So it says, why did the Lord allow this? What was in his plan? Their problem is they don't wait for an answer. They should have done nothing. But instead they go, let's go get the ark. We'll bring it, and then the ark will save us. Okay. Verse 7, the Philistines were afraid when they saw them bring this ark in. And they say, a god has come into the camp. Now, God hadn't, there was no glory cloud or anything. It was just this object that came in. But that's how their gods were. They were just objects. There's no glory, there's no fire, there's no light, there's no, just an object that they had created. And that was their God. So when they looked at the Jews, they're doing the same thing. The Israelites, they're doing the same thing. They're bringing their God in. And really, it was kind of the same thing because they hadn't prayed, they hadn't talked to God. They weren't bringing God's presence in. They were just bringing an artifact in that they decided was religious. So it's the same thing. Verse 10 says, so the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated again. And every man fled to his tent, and the slaughter was very great, and Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. Because they weren't doing what God said to do. They just made up their own solution. Verse 11 says, the ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. So two of the priests died because they were really corrupt. The father of the priest who had let them do all this stuff later found out about it, and then he died in shock. Verse 19 says, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, so Eli's daughter-in-law, because Eli was the older priest who died, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, one of the two sons that died, was pregnant and near time of delivery. And when she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. Right, she's about to pass out. It's killing her. Verse 20. And as she was dying, the women attending her said, "Don't despair. You've given birth to a son. At least you know that your life will go on through your son." But she did not respond or pay attention to them. She named the boy Ichabod. So kabod means the glory. Ichabod means no glory. Saying the glory has departed from Israel. Ichabod. Because of the capture of the ark and the deaths of father-in-law and her husband. So he's saying the glory would appear, and the glory is an important thing to have. So sometimes you have kabod and sometimes you have Ichabod. No glory, there's no presence of God. It's very important that we're doing things that allows the presence of God to manifest itself, where God chooses to manifest himself to bless what we're doing. Sometimes he'll manifest himself to curse what we're doing, and that we don't want that. We want him to manifest himself to bless. But what we really don't want is no manifestation at all. Because even if God comes in to curse what we're doing, at least he's speaking to us in that way, and we can go, okay, God didn't like that. Let me change. But Ichabod, no glory, then you're just like wandering in a desert. Leviticus 9, verse 7. So he's going to say the glory is going to appear once we do all these things. And Moses said to Aaron, so go to the altar, offer your sin offering. Hey, priest, so remember the priest had two offerings to offer. Offer your sin offering and your burnt offering and make atonement for yourselves and for the people. Just reminding us the difference. The sin offering, the burnt offering. God's teaching them how to approach him. The sin offering is about a specific no, it's not. The sin offering is covering sins, not specific. I'm sorry, not specific. Specific is the trespass offering. We didn't bring that. The sin offering just covers anything you may have done, intentional, unintentional. It's just the thought of it. The sin offering given removes the separation between God and man. They're just layers of stuff that we've done that cause a separation, but the sin offering removes all of that, repairs the separation. The burnt offering is symbolic of the person themselves being on the altar. You know how in Romans it says, make yourselves a living sacrifice, that you should be on the altar. You're totally giving yourself. The burnt offering represents a life of dedication. That should have been me that was consumed by that fire. That's me in that altar. And the burnt offering is your substitute, right? But it represents, this is me offering myself up totally to you. Sin offering is about removing that separation. The burnt offering is about saying to God, I'm giving myself totally 100% to you. So do that first, you priests, and offer the offering of the then offering the offering of the people and make atonement for them as the Lord commanded. So Leviticus 9, verse 8, Aaron therefore went to the altar, killed the calf of the sin offering, which is for himself, it says. Verse 9, it says, and then the sons of Aaron brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and then poured the blood at the base of the altar. So this blood is touching the altar, and it's all around. Sin offering first. Verse 11, it says, then the flesh and the hide were burned with fire outside the camp. So sin offering is the one offering that had to be burned outside the camp. Everything else happened in the camp, but the sin offering, that must be carried away. When they built the tabernacle in Jerusalem, when they built the temple in Jerusalem, they would take the sin offering outside the camp for 1,000 years, and the hill outside the camp was Mount Moriah. It was, well, one of the hills, it was Calvary, right outside the camp, outside that eastern gate. That's where Golgotha, that's where Jesus was crucified, right? So he's training them. The sin offering must happen outside the camp. So that when Christ was offered outside the camp, they would recognize that. Because he's giving them for 1,000 years, you're going to do it this way, so that when it happens and everyone, the prophets say, this is the Lamb of God, and he'll go, oh, he's the sin offering that covers everything. Sins known, unknown, sins that hadn't happened yet, have happened in the past. He's the sin offering. Okay. Leviticus 9, verse 12. Then he killed the burnt offering. That's about your dedication. And Aaron's son presented him the blood, which he sprinkled all around the altar. Leviticus 9, verse 15. I'm just skipping through because some of these details are repeated. Then he brought the people's offering. So they did the sin offering, the burnt offering. Separation is mended through the sin offering. The life of dedication through the burnt offering. Then there's three more offerings: the grain, the peace, and the wave offering. The grain offering says, this is your provision, God, but all that I have is yours. This is your provision. Peace offering is the meal that they have with God. Like you invite a guest over. Here's the peace offering. They offer it up to God as though he's sharing it with them. Our fellowship is restored. Then the wave offering is saying all the people are included. The heave offering would go up and down toward God, but the wave offering would go all toward the people. And it just meant symbolically, we're all blessed, we're all included in this. So, he's doing the people's offering. Leviticus chapter 9, verse 15, the second part of it says, he took a goat, which was the sin offering for the people, killed it and offered it for sin, like the first one. Verse 16, he brought the burnt offering and offered it according to the prescribed manner, getting rid of separation. Burnt offering is life of dedication. Then he brought the grain offering. All that I have is yours. The grain is their produce. They're not offering up an animal. They're offering up their works. You got to do the other ones first. Everybody knows you got to do the other ones first. Got to do the other ones first. Everybody knows that. When they read about Cain and Abel, and Cain just shows up with the peace offering and never does the burnt offering. They're all like, oh, and God rejected it, and there's no explanation because they all get it. Well, because they've read the whole Bible. Well, they were there, so they already knew. If we've read the whole Bible, then we understand these offerings, and we know that when Moses writes Genesis, clearly, Cain can't just walk up. You got to do the burnt offering first. You got to do the sin offering first. The blood has to be shed. You can't. He should have known that. Okay. So then he brought the grain offering, took a handful and burned it outside the offer besides the burnt, next to the burnt offering sacrifice in the morning. That's verse 17. Verse 18, Leviticus 9:18. He also killed the bull and the ram and sacrifices of peace offerings, which were for the people. Grain, peace, wave. I'm saying it like you should remember it. We just understand the principle. The peace offering, which are for the people. That's our fellowship with God. It's our peace. We have peace with God now. We're inviting God over for dinner. And Aaron's son presented to him the blood, which he sprinkled all around the altar. Verse 21. But the priest and the right thigh. So when they took the peace offering, which were usually these birds, they would save the breast and the right and the thigh, like the left breast on the right breast on one and the right thigh on the other. If you got two birds, take the breast, take the thigh. Breast is next to the heart. The thigh represents strength. Okay, and they were waved as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses had commanded. Leviticus 9:22. Then Aaron lifted his hand toward the people, and he blessed them. And he came down from offering the sin offering. So the altar is built up a little high. They would say, don't build it too high, and make sure you have an underwear, because if the wind blows, you don't need to see your business. So he came down from offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, the peace offerings. Verse 23, Leviticus 9:23. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting and came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Right, there are a few times that the glory appears to everybody. Uh, Probably a white cloud of lightning. Okay, glory of the Lord is different than the fire of the Lord. Glory of the Lord appears in Exodus chapter 16, verse 9. It says, one of the first times the glory appeared. It says, then Moses spoke to Aaron, say to all the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints. So this is when God had provided for them every day, part of the Red Sea, and they were complaining immediately, which is what we do. Like God's thinking, I just fed you yesterday, the day before, just because it looks, you don't think I'm going to come through for you again? And so they're complaining, like they want to vote for a new God or something, which they actually tried once, right? We're going to go back to Egypt. So it says, now it came to pass, as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked down toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. So the glory of the Lord is appearing, God's appearing, but he's upset. Now he's going to say, okay, I'll feed you every day. I was going to just let you live by faith, and every day was a new experience, but no, I'm going to give you the same meal every day for the next 40 years. It's going to be manna, and you're going to eat it, and you're going to be full and be coming out of your nostrils because you just don't think I can feed you. So you're going to have, okay. So the glory, God's glory appearing, but in this case, it's kind of judgment. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 9, after they had gone and looked over into the promised land and sent spies, and the spies come out and said, I don't know what God's talking about, but we cannot take this land. Joshua, Caleb, others appeal to the people. And in verse 9 says, only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Don't fear them. Like, we can go in there and do this. In verse 10 of Numbers 14, it says, and all the congregation said to stone them with stones. We don't have to listen to this, put up with this craziness. It says, now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the meeting before all the children of Israel. So the glory is appearing, God's manifesting his presence, but to bring judgment, right? Now, he says, I'm a fire, and he can't change his qualities. But the fire can either come to bless you, cook your food, or it can come to destroy you, but that's kind of depending on you. Are you putting food in the fire? Or are you putting paper in the fire to burn things up? What are we putting in the fire? Because the fire's not going to change. The fire, God is God. And when he shows up, it either brings blessing or cursing, but that always depends on us. So, Leviticus chapter 9, verse 24. So first, the glory is just appearing, right? And then in verse 24, and it says, and then a fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. So the fire comes out, consumes it. Some people, they don't know if the fire came down from heaven like lightning and hit it, or if the altar actually caught on fire and consumed it. Because it's two different ways that's spoken of in the Bible. So they know fire came from the Lord and consumed the burnt offering. The glory appeared, probably a cloud, the glory, and then fire, whether it came down or suddenly appeared. And anyway, so here's some times when the fire has appeared, so that we can get kind of a consistent pattern here. In Judges chapter 6, verse 17, Gideon has been visited by an angel, but he can't believe it's an angel because he's thinking, why are you appearing to me? I'm like nothing. I'm from one of the lesser tribes. This is when they've already crossed over to the promised land, and the tribes have divided up. You take the east, you take the north, you take the west. Gideon says, well, I'm way up here in north. I live near the Midianites. How do I know I'm not just crazy? So verse 17 in Judges chapter 6, he says to him, he says to this angel, this messenger from God, if now I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Because I guess that's legitimate. Well, anyway, verse 18, do not depart from here, I pray, until I come to you and I bring out my offering and set it before you. Because I've read the Bible. I know how God comes down and consumes the offering in his fire. So if this is really God, let me bring out an offering and see what happens. Verse 21, then the angel of the Lord put out the end of the staff that was in his hand, because he showed up looking like just a traveler. He's got a staff. He doesn't have huge wings. Even I know every time in a movie we see an angel, they always got huge wings, but only a few angels had wings. Most of them were just messengers, showed up with the message and left, and you had to believe. Was that really God? Because if God just shows up and writes his name across this, then that doesn't take much faith. And God loves it when we trust him and believe him. So he doesn't do things sometimes in a spectacular way to remove all opportunity to believe. He does things in a subtle way. And you go, I wonder if that was God. I think that's God speaking to me. And he wants you to believe and act on that. So the angel of the Lord is just there with this messenger. Angel just means messenger. It's just there with the staff. But he puts out the end of the staff that was in his hand, and he touched the meat and the unleavened bread that he'd brought out as an offering. He brought a peace offering and he brought burnt offering. And fire rose out of the rock that he had placed the offering on. So fire rose out of the rock and consumed the meat and unleavened bread, and the angel of the Lord then departed out of his sight. So that's a case where fire came out of the rock and went up. Okay, so here's another case. 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 16. David has sinned and the people have sinned. David has said, I want a number and see how many people we have. And he's doing that simply because he doesn't trust that God's going to protect him. He knows how many people are in the army of the enemy. And so I need to know how many people we have. And in this case, it's not like you can never count people, but in this case, the whole nation was putting their faith in their numbers. So God is judging them because that's an insult to him. I protected you. I used Gideon to protect you. Samson, one person. I protected you when it was 300 of you against 10,000. David against Goliath. Why do you, and this is, you, David, you should know better. Why are you counting? So he's judging them so he's judging them. Plague is being released. People are dying. Verse 16 of 2 Chronicles 21 says, then David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven, having in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem, like he's just about to bring judgment down in Jerusalem. The plague is heading down toward Jerusalem. And suddenly he can see what's going on in the spirit realm. So David and the elders clothed themselves in sackcloth, and they fell on their faces, so they put on ashes and to show their repentance. In verse 22, David goes to Ornan. He's told, go to and buy this threshing floor. Buy a threshing floor. The threshing floor is where the grain is separated from the chaff of wheat. I separate the good from the bad. And on the threshing floors where this happens, the good goes into the barn, the bad is burned, the chaff is burned. So buy a threshing floor. So he buys this threshing floor right outside of Jerusalem. Well, on the east of Jerusalem. And the east, so because Jerusalem eventually expands, but right at the east wall, where they're going to build a temple, they later build a temple right there where David bought this land. But Ornan at the time owns the threshing floor. Verse 22, then David said to Ornan, grant me the place of this threshing floor, that I may build an altar on it to the Lord. So they hadn't yet built the temple. This is the first thing that's built, is this altar to the Lord. And you shall grant it to me at the full price, that the plague may be withdrawn from the people. So after some haggling, that happens. And in verse 26, it says, and David built there an altar to the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Now, we know what that is. Burnt offerings. I'm dedicating myself. We are now dedicated to you. And he offers peace offerings. We want to have fellowship with you. It all belongs to you, right? Burnt offerings and peace offerings. And he called on the Lord, and he answered him from heaven by fire on the altar of burnt offering. The glory appears, and fire, right, consumes the offering. In this case, it's not coming as judgment, but coming as acceptance. Same fire, but because of the actions of the person, we know it wasn't judgment. We know that it's forgiveness. So the Lord commanded the angel, and he returned his sword to its sheath. Okay, I will no longer bring this plague on Jerusalem. That's where it was headed. Right in the east part of Jerusalem, right in the outskirts of Jerusalem, I built this altar. Eventually, they built a temple there. 2 Chronicles chapter 7. It's Solomon, it's David's son, who builds the temple. David starts the plans, but his son completes it. And on the day they complete it, and the day that they dedicated it and went through this whole, the very same service that Moses and Aaron, his brother, had just done in the wilderness, the one that we're reading about in Leviticus, Solomon did the same thing when they dedicated this temple. Very same thing. In the 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 1, says, when Solomon had finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices. And the glory of the Lord filled the temple. Why not a sin offering? Why just the burnt offering? Why not the sin offering? Because by this time, the sin offering only happens once a year, on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur. So they initially did a sin offering, but by this time, once a year, the sin offering is given to cover all their sins. So it's just the burnt offering and the other offerings. So fire came down from heaven, and then it says, and then the glory of the Lord filled the temple. So this cloud filled the temple, full of lightning and light and brightness. And the priest could not enter the house of the Lord, even though they just dedicated the temple. Once they'd done everything that God had asked them to do, God's glory appeared. Just like Moses told them, once you're done, God's going to appear. And sure enough, his glory appears. So the glory of God fills the temple, fills the Lord's house. Here's the last couple. In 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah is fighting with the prophets of Baal. My friend says Baal. Baal, we say normally. He's fighting with them to see which one of them actually serves a true or living God. And so he tells them, verse 22, Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. That wasn't true. But that's what he thought. I'm the only one. No one cares but me. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. So therefore, verse 23, let them give us 2 bulls. Let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it in pieces, lay it on the wood, and put no fire under it. And I'll prepare the other bull, and I'll lay it on the wood, and I'll put no fire under it. then you can call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. So all the people answered and said, yes, that's, well, the King James says, that is well spoken. But they said, you said it.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. So they do their thing. Nothing happens, of course, because they don't serve a real God. Elijah does his thing, but he puts water all over it. Like, I'm going to make it hard for God just to show you this is not a trick. Verse 38 says, then the fire of the Lord fell. So on a couple of occasions, it came up from the rock. He describes it as falling like lightning from heaven and striking it. The fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Fire just came and consumed everything. Now, when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, the one you're talking about, he's got to be God. He answered by fire. So here's Jesus applying that same sort of thing. And sometimes the fire comes, remember, as judgment. Sometimes the fire came as showing acceptance. But Elijah wanted to point out when God brings that fire, we know that that's God coming. It's God speaking in some way. In Luke chapter 12, verse 49, and by the way, we're in the book of Luke on Wednesdays, Jesus says the most interesting thing, Luke 12:49, he says, I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. So I'm going to bring that fire to the earth, but I wish it was already started. Now he's saying this in response to some of the Pharisees who were challenging him because he's doing miracles, he's bringing blessings, and they don't like that. You're not doing it the way we think you should do it. So the fire is going to come, and remember in the examples I gave, sometimes it came down again as judgment, sometimes it came down as, it depends on the person. He says, that's what I came to do, bring a fire. And I wish that fire was already started so that either you consumed and we're accepting, God's accepting what you're doing, or you personally are consumed. But the fire is coming. In fact, in Luke 3:16, we've already read this, those of us who are studying it in Luke on Wednesdays. John answered and said to everybody, I indeed baptize you with water, but one mightier than I is coming, whose sandal I'm not worthy to loose. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. And he's not just a crazy person. Well, he was a crazy person, but he's not saying this because he's a crazy person. God, the baptism of fire was a thing that they had witnessed throughout of God either approving of the sacrifice that was given or coming down to burn it up, and judgment. But he says that's what he does. So in verse 17 it says his winnowing fan, this is Luke 3, is in his hand, like he's the person in the on the threshing floor, separating the wheat from the chaff. He's doing that. He's separating the good from the bad. And that's what they used to do it. And he will thoroughly clean out his threshing floor. And again, he's using imagery that they know of. David was on the threshing floor when he built an altar to keep people from being killed. Uh, this idea that he is the great person who separates the good from the bad. He says he will gather the wheat into the barn, but the chaff he will burn with his unquenchable fire. So when Jesus says, I came to send fire, they should understand the allusions. In Luke 12:50, he says, but I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. So that fire that I came to bring, I wish it was already kindling. But there's a baptism that I need to be baptized with. There's the fire I need to go through, the fiery trial. But I'm going to bring the fire. He says, and how distressed I am until it's accomplished. I'm kind of frustrated, but I'm waiting on God's direction. I'm waiting because I'm showing you what it's like to be obedient. There are many things I could say what I would do, but I'm demonstrating that I'm making myself a servant while I'm in this body. And I'm just going to do what God says to do. I'm just going to follow his leading. But eventually that fire is coming. So fire comes down, consumes the offering, consumes the burnt offering, the peace offerings, everything they'd done that Moses, and now the temple's been dedicated. And in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 24, the last verse says, and when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. Glory cloud appears, bright light, and then fire comes down or fire comes up, whichever way it happened, and consumes the offering. And they went, yes, the God who answers by fire, he's God. And so it was God's dramatic way of saying, I'm accepting your sacrifice. I'm accepting what you're doing. But know that I'm still fire. And so if you're not listening to me, if you're not doing what I'm saying, that you're putting yourself closer to the edge, fire will eventually come in some form in your life because of your disobedience. So the fire can either be used for good or bad, but that always depends on us. God is consistent. I do not change. When the Bible says I don't change, it means I stay fire. But it's up to our actions, how that fire comes into our life. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Around 11:15, I will be preaching from the 1 Samuel chapter 29. Uh, and at my church, for the two of you who somehow listen to that, bless your hearts. And then again on Wednesday, I will be back in the book of Luke, where we're going through uh, Jesus' ministry through the viewpoint of how Luke is demonstrating what Jesus is there to do, there to see. Uh, so thank you very much for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye.